was splitting in two, and then one night, all of a sudden, I had a dream, and in that dream, I had transitioned. Um, and I woke up just freaked out, and this is in the middle of October of like 2012, and I can't tell my boss this because he was mad at me and yelling at me about having late night conversations with just late night conversations, nothing else, just conversations. I can't tell him about gender and all of this stuff that I'm dealing with and freaked out about why haven't I dealt with this for a year and now all of a sudden I do. Um, Instead, he kind of twisted it and put it all back on my relationship. I like 2 days later, I'm talking with him and he said, I couldn't talk to you for a month after I came back. And he said, people tell me that I give good advice. They tell me that I give great advice. And you know what? I think they're right because each time somebody chooses not to take my advice, they see my life spin out. It's their lives spin out of control. Like what? what is this? And I kind of again that new me of not of just wanting to kind of sort of push back, be myself, not just go along with the flow. I started pushing back on him and things just kept getting worse. It became this, you are the only one prolonging this conflict. This conflict's making me be a bad father and husband. You aren't fit to be a missionary. You know, just all of this stuff. And then eventually, the two others in the three-headed monster came over to visit, and they just kind of gave the standard Reformed Christian response of, well, you're supposed to submit to your leaders, right? And wouldn't even dive in to what was going on. They just took my boss aside and said, this is what's happening. And Torren, you need to learn how to submit. Um, and eventually I got fired because despite even trying to submit, I mean, I offered to try to get like mediation and counseling. I mean, I was the one that was constantly reaching out, trying to mend the relationship. And this guy would take every one of those, olive branches, grab it, and then hit me back across the face with it. And eventually I got fired. And so what I like to tell people is it felt like I died that day I got fired, but it was more like I got poisoned. Um, I came home, I actually flew home on Christmas Eve, 2012. And it was devastating because I had gotten to a point where I'm like, I don't care about what this guy says about me. I don't care about what he says about my relationship. I know who I am. I know what's been good and bad about this whole thing. And this guy isn't right. So I had tried to I had tried to sort of express that to, my future wife, and we were going to do some things at Christmas, and we were going to do some things together on Christmas Day that year, but it just got so bad that I flew home the day before. I said I can't do it anymore. So I flew home, and it eventually, my that woman and I got married about a year and a half later in 2014. But I like slowly was just becoming less and less of myself, just replaying the conversations that I had with my boss in my head. I mean, there were late nights up at 3 a.m. in the shower talking to myself, like replaying these conversations, trying to figure out what went wrong. Um, and even part of that was my future wife had stayed overseas too. She didn't come home when I did. She didn't get fired. She wasn't considered to have done anything wrong. It was all me. Um, and so I had, this sort of 6 months of just replaying these conversations over and over and over again, having flashbacks. I'd go to church and I'd have, a certain song would come on and I'd have a flashback to my boss saying, "Oh, that's my favorite song," and have to walk out of church. Years later, I mean, after my wife and I had gotten married, we'd sit down in a church and I'd hear a particular verse or something and have a panic attack. Um, and just eventually I just quit altogether. I didn't give up and say, well, I don't believe in God anymore. But I said, I can't be around this. Um, and so what kind of happened, and this is eventually is what led me to transitioning is I just made a series of choices that were just all trying to run away from that experience. There were looking back, there were many people, many spiritual leaders, pastors, people that I didn't recognize were safe. That looking back, these were safe people that I could have talked to and talked to them about my struggles in Southeast Asia, talked to them about my struggles with gender, and been easily kind of, well, not easily, but gone on like a path of healing. And instead, I just kept running.